Y'all, special speaker today.
Turns into a roast after a few times.
This man, you can see the smile on his face. A new father, relatively new. Your beautiful son is how old now?
He is about, 21 months, I guess. Yeah.
All right.
Already.
Wow. Okay. He's already about 5 feet tall, as I saw him in the lobby this morning.
He weighs about 40 pounds.
Okay. Our own Ben Smith, Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Born in Muscle Shoals. Went to Alabama, mechanical engineer, master's degree in business. The man now works for
Pumping systems.
Pumping Systems is the name of the company. Okay. Somehow, Ben's a lot more talented than you think, because somehow he was able to convince the beautiful, the talented, the saintly Angela Marie Jordan to marry him. And Angela Marie now goes by Angela Marie Jordan Smith. Sometimes that's a step back. Just think being married to a Brown, being married to a Smith. But anyway, Angela Marie, would you hold up your hand?
There's a lot of us.
Where is your wife? There she is, okay. Many times the wives do not join us when their husbands are speaking. They met at Homewood Church. Okay.
Right over there.
Okay. Lovely young son, Tucker Jordan Smith. Now, Ben, all joking aside, Ben is a talented guy. He is a painter. He likes fast cars. He is a family man now, so he doesn't have a very fast car. He is writing a book. Okay.
Been a while since I wrote in that book, man. Come paint my house.
Yeah, he does that
I'm
too.
more on canvases, Donnie, but that's okay. I'll help you, though, with that.
He paints pictures of houses, I think, but certainly cars. Please help me welcome a man who was heard saying, if I had known babies were so much fun, I wouldn't have grown up so soon. Please welcome Ben Smith.
Thank you. Hey, I really, when I thought about what to talk about with everybody today, I know we've kind of slowly drained the class size a little bit. There's so many other, opportunities for other classes, other subjects. So I was trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about to really get more discussion. I enjoy more discussion-based classes, and that's me personally. I feel like I get more, involved. And so I started thinking, and I started looking back at old notes, and I found a class I had taught with Brian LeBou back, I guess it was 2014, early 2014, which it doesn't seem like it long ago. It's been over 4 years ago now. And it was on life's toughest questions, and I started looking through, I've keep a lot of my notes from these classes, and I started thinking, this could be good. And there's actually a little IRS story in here, so Donnie set me up great on that. But it's kind of funny Christ talking about, do you pay your taxes? And we're going to talk about that, which is very interesting how he does that. But life's tough questions. What are some tough questions you can think about that are tough to answer in your life? And I know a lot of you here have experienced a lot more of these tough questions through experiences in your life, and several that I've heard, and a lot of them come from unbelievers. One of them in particular is one that you hear from people who may be struggling with depression, may be struggling with all manner of things, but one of them is there more to life than this? Now, have you guys experienced, and this is kind of a question, and when you answer, I'll repeat it so everybody can hear. Have you ever known anyone who has dealt with this, maybe a family member or a friend, but have gone through something like that where they're just struggling to find a purpose, I guess? Have you ever experienced that? And if you have, are you willing to kind of share a little bit about it? It doesn't have to be very personal. Just, what do you think? Have you seen anyone like this? Is there more to life than this? Yes, sir. Donnie.
All right, most of you know, I don't know.
You speak loud enough. You don't need this. You're good. Go ahead.
Well, I'm the son of a preacher, Church of Christ, born and raised, and I was divorced. When you preach your son inside the goldfish bowl, you want to go fish, you're looking out, then suddenly you're on the outside of the goldfish bowl, you're looking in, and you're not inside anymore. And thought the most pointed comment made to Jenny and I when we got married was, we attended a good old traditional Church of Christ. And they said, Brother Phillips, we need to tell you this. You can't come here. And if you do, we want to make sure you know that there are trespass laws in the state of Alabama. And if you show up, we're going to call the law. So, I particularly, while I was divorced, was very depressed, very down, saw no real great.
Admit to others that they're seeking an answer for themselves.
I got you. Like the old standby that, hey, if I got a friend who's struggling with X, Y, Z, and that friend is themselves a lot of times. I know you've probably heard that before. I got a friend, that I know that's dealing with this and that. What would you? That's true. They respect you enough to ask you your opinion. That's true. So that is a good point. That's a good point.
I know that most psychiatrists become psychiatrists to figure out a problem that has been in their life.
No kidding.
Could be them, could be a loved one.
Huh. So there's some other big questions, and that's kind of what I want to get to many, many times. In fact, back when I did this part of this lesson before, take a wild guess in the Gospels how many questions Christ asked of not only his apostles, but in response to questions. He doesn't answer the questions directly a lot of times. And part of that, we'll talk about here in a minute, is because the question itself is not the right question. A lot of times, like we'll talk about, like Donnie was kidding with the IRS, the question about should we pay taxes? We'll talk about that here in a minute. That was a trap question from the start. And you see how Christ responded. We'll talk about that. But take a guess, just a wild guess. How many questions does Jesus ask of his disciples and others who aren't necessarily believers throughout the Gospels? Just guess. How many do you think? 100? 1,000? A little over on 1,000. There you go. 473. $1, Bob. $1. No. 157 times in the New International Version. 157 times. Jesus responds to questions with a question, or he poses important questions. So that leads me to think maybe I should be asking some good questions or helping people. Everybody's got questions about certain things right now, every one of us. Like, why is this guy talking to me right now? Anyway. Let's look at this a little bit. We're going to dive in a little bit here. So some big questions. I'm going to read through a couple of these, and we'll talk about a couple of them while we've got a little bit of time. One of them that I came up with when I was younger is, what is sin? Because when I was a kid, young, before I was baptized, I kind of had an idea, but I didn't really know for sure. They keep talking about sin. Well, how do I define that from an immature standpoint? What do you guys think? You guys are a little older. Sin now, how do you see it from your personal perspective? Separation from God is what I think of course. That's sin. But I guess in layman's terms, how do you define it for yourself to help you in your walk? How do you define it? Wow, that's excellent. Things that damage your spirit. That's good. I think that's good. What else?
The Greek.
Say again? Deliberate disobedience. Okay.
The Greek paints a picture with that word harmatia.
Harmatia?
It literally means as the archer pulls the bow and shoots at the target, but he misses the target.
Huh.
So it's literally to miss the target, and God being the target.
Interesting. There's so many ways to look at this question. That's why it's a tough question. Some of these are tough. That's why I'm wanting to pose them so you can. A lot of times we take for granted, what is sin? Oh, I know what that is. That's just me doing the wrong thing. Well, it's a little deeper than that, I think. A little bit deeper. Move a little forward here. Of course, is there more to life than this? That's a more personal question. We talked about that a little bit. How do we share the gospel, first of all, or the good news? How are we drawn to share the gospel to people? Now, just give you an example, I guess with Jesus, he didn't jump right in like the woman at the well, right? He tried to connect with her on a personal level at first. So he kind of started in the natural and then led kind of more to the supernatural. But how do we share the gospel, even if we're older, if we're staying at home? Doesn't matter. How can we do that? I'm going to start wondering a little bit just to get your eyes moving a little bit. How can we do that? What's an easy example? We start, I'll give you an example to get you going. We can start by our actions. Being kind to others, helping others without being asked for the help. Simple things, that's what I'm kind of getting at, simple things. How can we start in the natural, kind of like Christ did with the woman at the well, leading into more point blank? Let's talk about Jesus here. And it's uncomfortable, let me tell you, I'm one of the worst. I make excuses for myself constantly. Because even guys or people that come up at gas stations and you wonder their motive, right? This guy doesn't really need this or doesn't need my money, and you just don't want to deal with it. What are some things you've experienced? Even if it's stuff like I feel like later I should have done something or whatever. What are some experiences you've had? That's kind of want to pull out of you this morning. I don't want to lecture to you. What do you think? I know you got some stuff going. I can see some gears turning. What do you think? What are some, simple examples in your life you've experienced? Like I said, a person at a gas station who was probably homeless, but I kind of passed them off, and now I think back at stuff like that. Simple stuff. Speaking kindly, yeah. Just smiling at someone you don't know even and saying, how are you doing? God bless you, that makes a big difference. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was going to say just simple stuff.
Yeah.
Like going to Aldi's.
Simple stuff. It's simple stuff. Going.
Stuff like when you go to Aldi's.
Yeah.
Passing the buggy on to someone without taking the quarter back from them.
Yeah.
Telling them to pass it on. It's just really simple stuff.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, she's talking about like going to the grocery store, like at Aldi, you know how you put the quarter in and take the buggy and come back and take it back and whatever. Just being nice with people. That's, as Christians, we're called to much more than that. And a lot of times we're much less. And that's convicting. And sometimes I'm in a bad mood. Angela will tell you, a lot of times I come back from work and I'm frustrated. I've had customers come to me, that'll say, they're interested in buying some of our equipment. I'm like, well, great. And it gets me kind of fired up, and then the switch is flipped and they go with a competitor, and I'm just frustrated. And she's seen it before. I come home and it's like I got to switch that off. I know a lot of y'all have been there. You got to switch that off. Even especially with your spouse. Especially. We'll move forward here. How do we share the gospel? That's a pretty deep question. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Flip over to 2 Corinthians 3. And I'll read the very first part, and try to get your opinion on what this verse means, a couple of verses means. 2 Corinthians 3, first couple of verses here, 3 verses. Are we beginning to commend ourselves again? Are we patting ourselves on the back again here? Or like some, do we need letters of recommendation to you or from you? We do deal with that a lot in our society. Verse 2, this is what I want to get at, this metaphor here. You yourselves are like letters. You're our letters. You are our letters, written on our hearts, recognized and read by everyone, since it is plain that you are Christ's letter, produced by us, not written with ink. See where I'm going here? Not a physical letter, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on stone tablets, but on tablets that are hearts of flesh. So here's the question. How does your life read? How does your life read? And again, I guess this can be a rhetorical question. How does your life read? What is Paul getting at here with this metaphor? How you live, how you talk, how you interact, and this is what we were just talking about. In simple things, we're called to much more than what we do a lot of times. Going to the store, interacting with anybody you see, we're called to more. So the next, that I guess I will make this rhetorical, is how does your life read? We're supposed to be living letters that people can see. There's something different about Brian Parsons over there. You know what I mean? Something different. All right. Let's go down here a little bit. So going back to what Peter said, 1 Peter, always be prepared to give an answer, right? Or a defense in my translation. Always be prepared to give an answer. Here's another question. What if somebody comes up to you, a coworker or even a friend of yours that you know is not a believer, and ask, why are you a Christian, Julian? Why are you a Christian? Can you answer that? And how do you answer that? Because I don't know if I'd know how. Honestly, I'm being honest with you. Well, when I think about it now, I guess I'm thinking about it ahead of time. I'm like, how would I put that? I guess it depends on who asks it. What would you go to? What would be your first response? Why are you a Christian? Assuming this is an unbeliever. And this is what I want you to kind of answer for me if you can. Give me an idea of what you think. How would you answer that? Because I believe in Jesus. Any more? Yeah, yep.
Because I believe in Jesus.
Okay, what else? I mean, of course, that leads to more questions probably, especially if they're a non-believer. Like, okay, well, surely, I would think in American society, they've heard of Jesus before or seen him or heard of his name if they're not a believer. I mean, there's billboards out here. You've heard of him before. So that would lead to more questions more than likely.
Not too long ago, I met a man that had been in America 6 months.
Not too long ago, I met a man who had been in America for 6 months. And he did not know what I meant when I used the word God.
Huh.
He did not understand what God was.
Now, where was he from?
China.
Okay.
He had never heard of God.
Wow. Huh. That's incredible.
Ben, there's one thing I remember. This was on the radio years ago. It was before the fall of the Iron Curtain, and this person
Early 80s?
was giving their testimony, really, and saying what it was like to live in Russia at the time. I think she was in the 6th grade and said every morning, one of the first things the teacher would say to the class is, and remember, children, there is no God. It was a chilling thing to hear that.
I just heard the first bell, so I want to skip a little bit ahead and read some of this to try to get you thinking at least about it. Okay. Some questions that Christ asked. Again, 157 times Christ asked questions of people. And a lot of those times in response to questions. Have you ever thought about that or noticed that? When Christ is asked a question, he responds with a question. And a lot of times that's probably because that first question was not the right question, or the real thing they were asking was some underlying thing that they were getting at there. And we'll talk about that here in a second, toward the end. Okay. Yeah, here's a little joke I told before. Someone asked a Jewish rabbi, of course, Rabbi, why do you always answer a question with a question? And he replied, why shouldn't I answer a question with a question? So there's some things here, and I want to get to these points quick. Asking questions forces people to open up under several different assumptions. General assumptions about things, how they live, how the world is. Cultural assumptions, what culture they're living in, kind of like the Chinese guy coming up, he hadn't heard of God. They've got a whole different set of life circumstances they've grown up under, or that person was raised under. Let's go ahead here. Other big questions. Guy asked Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And what does Jesus say in that particular verse? He says, believe on me. How, if you weren't a believer and didn't, we've got the scope of the whole Bible here, so we kind of get what Jesus is getting at there. This guy, how, from his general assumptions or cultural assumptions, how do you think he registers that when he's asked that? I don't know. If you don't have this book as kind of a 2020 perspective, that's a tough deal. I don't know. Another one, Jesus looks back, I guess it was verse 19 in John. Jesus, asked him, why do you call me good? We kind of read that a little bit earlier, I think. Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. That's another question I even ponder a little bit now. When Christ responds, why do you call me good? You would assume if God is good and Jesus is God, then Jesus is good. But he says, why do you call me good? That's another question he responds with. Again, this goes very deep. I don't want to get too deep here. I want to kind of skim the surface and just kind of prick your interest so that maybe later you'll be like, I'm going to dig into that a little more, All right, turn to Matthew 22. We'll get into this end section here. And again, I'm skipping a lot of information, but like I said, I want to give you some things to think about this week. Matthew 22, 15, I think it's starting in 15. Matthew 22. Here we go. Okay, my section is entitled. What is yours entitled? What is there? Paying taxes to Caesar. What, Miss Linda? What was yours? Same thing. Okay. Yeah, mine is just called God and Caesar. So we're going to read some of this, and I'm going to touch on. This is a big question that, some of us. We'll read this a little bit. Verse 15, then the Pharisees went and plotted how to trap him by what he said. They sent their disciples to him with the Herodians, who were Romans. Teacher, they said, we know that you are truthful. That's nice. And teach truthfully the way of God. You defer to no one, for you don't show partiality. That's nice too. Tell us, therefore, what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? That question comes up. If I was a normal person and they're kind of buttering you up, and then they hit you with this question, big red flag to me. And then we know kind of the background here. But even in general conversation, yeah, you're a real nice guy. Now, should you pay your taxes? That just, to me, that kind of comes out of left field. But what's going on here? What happens if Jesus says yes here? Think about the background. What happens if it's a yes or no question? What happens if he says yes? So Jesus, if he says yes, he says it's okay for the Jews to finance the Roman oppression of the Jews, I guess. You see where I'm going with this? If he says yes. What if he says no? Don't pay him. What if he says no? What do you think? Encouraging rebellion. And guess who else is standing in the presence there of all these people listening? The Herodians are there, right? And that's why they said the Herodians were there, right there in verse 11. Or excuse me, 16. Yeah. They were listening to see if he said, no, don't pay him. Oh, then they got him. They got him. So what does he do? It's just amazing.
That's what he did to them. He amazed them.
I mean, the question, the perfect question he could have asked that just would bumfuzzle them and really just, and brilliant question. But the point is, what does Christ say? We'll read. Let's see what he says. He picks up this coin and he says, who's on this coin? Caesar. And he says, so give to Caesar what's Caesar and to God what is God's. Wow. A lot of times we kind of blow through that and think, oh, that's just Jesus. But think about how brilliant this question is. It was a perfect response to a trap question where no right or wrong, the point I'm trying to get at here in this situation is giving the right answer to the wrong question is always wrong. I'll say it again. Giving the right answer to the wrong question is always wrong. Why? Why is that? What was that, Brian? Why is that? What do you think? Why is that wrong? Why is that so important? So the question here, it appears to be like it's about paying tax. You can come on up, Russ. You don't tell them about nothing. The question here appears to be about paying taxes, but it's not really. Could be part of that. Following laws of the land. Yeah. Really deep down, I think the question with Jesus at least, it's more about holiness. The question behind the question.
Are you going to follow God or man?
Exactly. Are you going to follow God or man? And how he knew, of course, it was Jesus. He knew they were trapping him. So he had the brilliant response. And I'll just close with this. I don't want to get into too much more. Think about this. This is another thing I think about sometimes too. When Christ was put on trial with Pilate, he didn't really respond to any questions in his defense. In this one case, he typically responded, when it dealt with everyday people or his apostles, he'd respond with that question, but he never did in his own defense. Why do you think that is? I've got an idea. My opinion. Why do you think he never responded? I've said this before when I've taught a couple of classes. Some of y'all, I don't know if y'all remember what my opinion was, but
He wasn't here to glorify himself.
okay.
He was here to glorify God.
He wasn't here to glorify himself. He was here to glorify God. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I think I guess Ben's opinion, I'm right there with you. But I think if he had, like in this case, he had the perfect response to this trap question, right? If he had responded in his own defense in front of Pilate, he would have had the perfect defense. And that was not his end. He was there to not glorify himself, right there with you. So he didn't respond.
But in the answer that he gave, these men were intelligent men, and they had spent a period of time trying to come up with a question that would entrap Christ.
Yes.
But that short, sweet answer that he gave left them speechless because they were amazed at the master of the tongue that he gave.
Yeah. That's something with Scripture, especially this little section, I just find it very, very interesting how powerful and brilliant Christ is. And we just, a lot of times, some of this, we neglect it and kind of blow through it and just say, oh, that's Jesus, and just keep going. And I think we need to look more, a lot of this, how we can try to improve ourselves as Christians by looking at some of these examples.
But in the answer that he gave, he answered them with the answer that they wanted.
Yeah, both groups of people.
He did.
Yeah.
He did not show an allegiance
To Rome or the Jews.
but he did not alienate Rome. And by doing that, he showed a masterful mind over theirs that they couldn't comprehend,
Yes.
and they respected.
Any other that's great. Any other questions? Talking about questions? Thank y'all very much. Come on, Russ.
Okay, I remember thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
And I remember after some of the questions with one group that said that they didn't ask him any more questions.
That's true.